fans will be upset if you do not deliver on what the expectations are that you set early on in your story. It is critical to make sure that your fans know what they're getting into, because if you start your series one way and then continue into something else, that's when your fans get upset. So naturally, I messed this up instantly, because the opening of Arcane Ascension is completely different from what you get into even in the middle of that book. And then later on in that same series, I also experiment significantly. Feeling consistent in style and structure from what you start out with, hugely important.
This is the CritRPG podcast, your one-stop shop for everything lit RPG, progression fantasy, and Royal Road. Hi everyone, and welcome to the CritRPG podcast, the only podcast that is so over steamboats. With me today is Andrew Rowe. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm Andrew Rowe, and I'm doing very well. Although it is 1 o'clock. No, it's 2:14 in the morning now. We've been talking for an hour already.
Yes.
So yeah, it's late. I apologize if I'm incoherent. I'm going to ramble a lot.
That is going to be fine, because that's the entire premise of this podcast. I prod you with a question, and you tell me everything. Without further ado, actually, Andrew, you probably don't need any big introduction. You've written lots of books, and people know your name. But why don't you sell me on one of your books?
Sure. So I'm going to go non-standard with this one. I will give a brief intro. I'm Andrew Rowe. I'm principally known for Arcane Ascension. That's my most popular series. It is not my first series. I'll probably ramble about this later. Arcane Ascension started out as a spin-off, which I already rambled to you a little bit about earlier. We'll see if
In the
that ends
Patreon
up
content,
being
yes.
podcast. But what I'm going to pitch today is one of my current favorites, which I'm working on the sequel to right now, which is How to Defeat a Demon King in 10 Easy Steps. That is my first series that has gotten a trad book deal, which I'm sure we're going to want to talk about, because that's virtually non-existent in this space. So that's going to be interesting.
You and Matt. And
yeah, Matt's on my book cover for the new version of Demon King. I got a cover quote from Matt. He's
oh my god, is it wildly inappropriate?
Well, maybe if you took like the entire statement, we've got a truncated version that's like, this is a good book or something, where in reality, he probably said something about feet at some point, but that's not on the book cover.
Yeah, because I think he gave Haylock also a good shout, because they're friends.
Sure.
And I was like, no, this can't be a Matt Dinneman book quote. Matt Dinneman
That's
book
the
quotes are
trick. They do
different.
the ... and then truncate, and so that they can get something coherent instead of something like, absurdly lewd, like what probably came out of Matt's mouth.
Yeah, I mean,
which I
this is
say
probably going to get
absolute love.
This is probably going to get me demonetized on Patreon, on YouTube. But I think the quote was, he replied to me on that comment, and he said that he's like, yeah, you're right. If I had known this would be on a book cover or something like that, I would have said, I love this book so much, I would let Sergeant Snip circumcise my son. So
dark.
Yeah. His son is almost an adult, I think.
Wonderful.
So yeah, that's such, yeah. He's a national threat or treasure. We'll see.
He's a treasure. Matt's fantastic.
Yeah.
I love and appreciate Matt.
You don't understand. I have a long standing and very one-sided feud with Matt Dinneman.
Oh no, I did not know that.
No, because it's a joke. Because I love his books. And at some point, stuff we talked earlier about, right? I couldn't read more because it's getting too emotional for me. Right. And so I was like, Dinneman, how dare you make me feel things? This is not how it works. I make you feel things, not you me. And now I'm in my villain arc, where Matt is concerned. But yeah, one day I will get him on the pod, and we will have words.
You should. That would be wonderful. I'm sure a lot of people would love to hear what he has to say about this stuff. He really is a trailblazer in terms of what I was talking about earlier with getting a traditional deal.
Yes.
I would say Evan Winters as well, in the progression fantasy space as opposed to lit RPG space, with Rage of Dragons is another trailblazer. I hope I said his name right. Is it Winter or Winters? Either way, Rage of Dragons, phenomenal book, progression fantasy, and one of the earliest ones to get a trad deal as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like, so tell me a bit more about this, because like, I think the blog post went out like yesterday. So what's it like?
So, okay. So first off, How to Defeat a Demon King in 10 Easy Steps came out as an Audible original several years ago, which in of itself is kind of wild. It is my parody of 80s JRPGs. So Zelda, Dragon Quest, Ys, Final Fantasy, things like that. And it is an affectionate and loving parody because those are the games that I grew up with as a kid. And I was shocked by the level of success that this had. I guess it resonated with a lot of people. A lot of people grew up with either that first generation that I did of, the original Zelda and Dragon Quest and stuff on the NES, or I also did a lot of parodying things like Ocarina of Time for the Nintendo 64, tropes from Lufia and other SNES era stuff. So those things might have also. I love Lufia so much. I was so sad when Square Enix bought the rights and then did a DS weird remake of Lufia 2 that was nothing like Lufia 2, and then they just completely threw out the franchise after that. What a travesty.
Yeah. Because like Lufia, like I'm getting completely sidetracked here, but let me just say,
no, please
Lufia 2 is absurdly progressive for its age. Like
one of my absolute favorite games of all time. Yeah, genuinely, I love it.
Like these people actually get like married, and like she's actually like for their wedding they kind of like fight monsters together, and like it's like she's actually a capable woman. Like, what the fuck is going on here? Like this is the 90s.
I have a nod to that exact scene that I have already written for my Demon King sequel. So you heard it first. Huge spoilers for a book that probably will not be out until late next year. I have a scene to Maxim. I have a nod to Maxim and Salon's wedding from Lufia 2 in Demon King 2.
Yeah. It was like, it's actually a really, really good story. And also the game. So okay, again, you were saying we keep getting sidetracked. So you mentioned that it is a wonderful story. It is a story about your love for 90s video games and tropes and stuff like that. And I think that's already good enough. I looked up the blurb. For anyone who doesn't know, I try to make a point of not reading a lot of people I have on the podcast, so I can ask them innocent questions as I was meeting them on the street. But yeah, so that's getting a trad deal. So what's that like?
It is. Okay, so I guess I probably should explain the premise aside from just the tropey stuff going on. So the premise of How to Defeat a Demon King in 10 Easy Steps is that there is the classic cycle of a demon king appears and a hero rises to defeat them. And that happens in this universe every 100 years. And what this story is examining is somebody who is in the midst of that cycle where they know that their world will not be saved by a hero for a significant period of time, because that's how that works, deciding, I'm just going to go defeat the Demon King right now. I am not waiting for a hero to save the world. That is ridiculous. The Demon King is killing thousands of people as we speak. This is nonsense. I'm just going to go out and do something about it. So you have a non-classic JRPG hero who is going to attempt to subvert the JRPG hero cycle. And I would say that a lot of it is essentially about complacency, and people who are complacent when they see that the world works in a certain way. They're like, that's just how the world works. And this is sort of my if I have any narrative message at all in a novella that is largely a parody, it is about, don't be complacent when something is really, really terrible. Go out and actually do something about it.
Mm-hmm. Go into a dungeon.
There's the actual book. Sorry, what's that?
I think that's your Matt Denman quote. When something goes wrong in the world, just go into a dungeon.
There you go. And there's plenty of that in this story too. But in terms of the trad deal, so my literary agent, Paul Lucas, has been shopping around my books, and I would say post-Dinnaman era, There has been a lot more interest in actually looking at the lit RPG and progression fantasy marketplace. Paul is a fantastic agent. He's one of the absolute best in anything. And he got a number of people interested in my books, both in terms of Arcane Ascension and in terms of Demon King. But moving Arcane Ascension to trad would be a very big ask. Yes. Because I have, 12 odd books or so, maybe 13 at this point, in that setting out already. Migrating that to a traditional publisher with all of the deals that already exist, and then figuring out release and all that stuff, that would be a huge deal for the publisher to invest in something like that. And then the mechanics of that, when I've already got Audible books and things like that out, very complicated. So at the moment, it was much easier structurally to start out and to sort of test the market with what would happen with Demon King. And so Saga, which is part of Simon & Schuster, this is sort of their own experiment, as far as I can understand it, with seeing how lit RPG works in the trad space. And Joe Monti, who is my publisher there at Saga, he seems like an absolutely phenomenal person. He is somebody who played D&D in the 80s. We've got stories about Gen Con that we can share. He understands this stuff better than a lot of publishers would. So he's a great match for this.
And there's so much going on behind the scenes, like when you're talking to these trad pubs. Because all the editors I go to are like, hey man, I would love this. This is great. But I will not get this through with a board. So that's
sure.
That's the thing, right? Because there's a board of people who really want like a certain thing that they think is safe, because they have a company of like 1,000 people to think about, right? They can't mobilize like several $million to kind of publish a story that might not land. So I get it. And I'm not going to go into like the whole shareholder problem here, but I can. The editors I've talked to at Frankfurt and also in other avenues, they're all super nice people. They're all great, and they want to buy your stuff, but especially for like translation stuff, right? Which I've kind of like doubled my feet into a little bit in Frankfurt. They're like, "Oh, this sounds great," and then I tell them the word count, and like, "Oh no."
Sure. Right. That's another area where Demon King is a much easier sell, because Demon King is about 49,000 words, whereas Arcane Ascension 1 is over 200,000. Yeah. And so that is a big ask to get a fantasy publisher to sign for a 200,000 word book. That's usually not where authors debut, even now. And that's interesting in this marketplace, because a lot of people in the lit RPG and progression fantasy space are coming in with web serials. And structurally, when they convert those to books, you end up with massive word counts.
Can you even imagine The Wandering Inn as a trad novel?
It can't happen with our current publishing structure. Like, it's what, 12, 13 million words now or something? That's absolutely ludicrous. And so I would love to see it in bookstores, but it would be an entire shelf just for like the series. Like one copy of it would be an entire bookshelf.
Like the first book.
Yeah, exactly.
And the poor people, like they would have to I don't think the printing presses could hold up with them, with ABBA. So we'll see.
No, Pirate ABBA is absolute master. We talked pre-podcast main part about long word counts per day, and what Pirate can do. I don't think anybody else in the industry can match Pirate, not in the long term. You might get somebody else who can do 10,000 words a day once. I might have done that once or twice in my entire career, but Pirate does it consistently, and that is mind-boggling to me.
I think their record was I think they wrote an entire book in a week, and not just a small book. It was I want to say it was above 80,000 per week.
I mean, no, that's ridiculous. It is mind-boggling that Pirate can do that consistently.
Yeah, that was
good work, Pirate.
It was for Gravesong, but Gravesong also like we were talking about this earlier, right? About quality and quality. I think that Gravesong needed some edits afterward. So
I haven't read it. I've read the first roughly 3 books, and by that I mean on the website books.
Yeah, but
So,
they did do some edits. I know that. Like it's just it was just good. But like I also think that like afterward, the desire to put out this immense amount of words kind of went down because you can't keep this up forever. And I think even getting to like 20,000 a week is ridiculous
it
because
is.
with that, like how many weeks do you like in 10 weeks you have an entire novel? That's like 3.5 months.
And that's a longer novel by trad
Yeah,
standards. Like your starting point for trad is more like 100,000 words for a book.
yeah,
We do these 200,000 or crazier ones if you're Bryce O'Connor and doing like a 400,000 word book in this space. But that is not typical in trad publishing.
yeah,
I mean, I
sure.
guess you've got Runes in Truth up there. That's, Brandon Sanderson's also an outlier.
Yeah, oh yeah, very much. I think one of like Brandon has two winning strategies, and one of them was he went to every con, and he just
Absolutely.
gave people his books, and like he made friends with lots of people at cons. And at some point, like in the first con, probably no one went to his desk, and then at the second con, like two people went to his desk, and then at the third con, they were like, "Oh, what are those three people doing over there? Let's go and like check it out." And then that's how it works. And like consistency is Brandon Sanderson's super strength. He
It
is
is.
amazing at it. And the other one is he is immensely friendly. Have you read this? I think it was like was it in Vox? I forgot which page it was on. Someone wrote like this entire essay about meeting Brandon Sanderson and how he hated it because there was nothing interesting about this man to write.
Oh man, that was so mean.
It was like I read that and I was like, hey, this guy is like really really upset because he has nothing like. He spent like an entire weekend with this guy and has nothing to show for it, and he kind of like tries to write it into like Brandon Sanderson is like boring, but like that's not how you do this, dude. Like you write about yourself. Like that's how you do good gonzo journalism. You write about yourself. If you can't find anything, you're like, hey, I was really depressed here, and he was trying that. But whichever editor like went over this thing and was like, no, you need to make this about Brandon Sanderson, like did this guy a big disservice because even Brandon said, like, look, he was really sad about not finding what he was trying to find. Like, I'm not like like on drugs or hiring prostitutes or being a secret asshole. He's just like a nice dude. So
Yeah,
yeah, but it was mean, very very mean.
it was mean, and that seemed very uncalled for. And I don't know. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Brandon just seems like a really chill dude and incredibly consistent. His work ethic is what makes him successful, I think. Just that he just keeps trucking like a machine, and to some degree, that's what Pirate is doing in the web serial space, just with a slightly different style and structure.
Oh yeah, totally. I think like instead of like doing 10 books around one meta system, they do one book around one world with like thousands of different characters, and they're all interesting and they're all intertwining. And no killing goblins. Speaking of which, what's the best advice you've ever gotten as a writer?
Tricky. So I was prepping for this interview to some degree, but I still had a hard time coming up with a good answer to this. I think that what I'm probably going to give you is some advice that Will White gave to me earlier on in my career, which is that, and I'm paraphrasing something that Will said. We've talked many times, but the general message was that fans will be upset if you do not deliver on the expectations are that you set early on in your story. It is critical to make sure that your fans know what they're getting into, because if you start your series one way and then continue into something else, that's when your fans get upset. So naturally, I messed this up instantly, because the opening of Arcane Ascension is completely different from what you get into even in the middle of that book. And then the later on in that same series, I also experiment significantly. But Will was trying to guide me right from the start. But the he was absolutely correct. Feeling consistent in style and structure from what you start out with, hugely important.
Like about the promise, like the core promise of the book, right? You got to keep that.
Exactly.
And doesn't it always seem to go this way? It's like someone tells you something very, very profound, and like you only find out how profound it was after you find it out yourself.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Will was trying very hard to share that wisdom with me, and I mean, it's difficult because in my case, I was going with different forms of wisdom, and this is an interesting conflict here. So my original opening for Arcane Ascension was actually much closer to on message for what Will was saying, in that I introduced Arcane Ascension initially with my original opening scene with Corn Cadence, my protagonist, on a train by himself to get to this immensely dangerous dungeon that he's going to be going through. And he's thinking about like his family and the fact that everybody else who is going to this event is sitting with like their father or their mother, and he's by himself and he's estranged from his family. And it's a much more cerebral and introspective kind of scene. And I cut that in order to get to faster pacing. I wanted to get straight into the dungeon crawl as quickly as possible. And that did make for a stronger opening in terms of pacing, but it also made it totally inconsistent with where the series goes after the dungeon crawl. So that was an interesting choice where oftentimes you do see a prologue that is faster paced than the rest of the story as an initial hook. And that's sort of what I did in my finished version of Sufficiently Advanced Magic, where I throw you straight into a dungeon crawl to get you hooked in. But in that case, what I ended up with was a story that once I get to a magical university is very different.
Yeah.
And a lot of people see that transition and they're like, I want dungeon Corin, not school Corin. And then I've got a problem.
Yeah. And then like, I read that book over 4 years ago.
Sure. So I do not expect you to remember any of it.
No. I'm thinking about like the train intro, and I did like this. Like I did like the school part. I remember that.
That's
so
right.
There you go.
So there are a number of people who say Arcane Ascension gets good when you get to the school. And then there are a number of people who say the exact opposite, who are like, I thought this was just going to be a tower climbing series. Why did you stop doing the tower? Why isn't this entire series in a tower? And that is the flaw that I had as a writer when I start out with a tower climbing scene and then go to a magical school. And, you know, it's in the blurb that he's going to go to the magical school but that's not good enough. I also do talk about it in the first page or two that he is doing this with the expectation of step 1 is this, step 2 is going to magic school, etc. He has a plan, but that doesn't really matter, especially when things in the dungeon itself sort of go off the rails of that plan, and people wanted immediate continuity on that. And I think that that's a reasonable concern to have when I have all this interesting plot relevant stuff happening. And then the main plot essentially pauses for a magical school. That was my intention from the start. I wanted this to principally be a magical school story that has the tower was basically the entrance exam. It's kind of like how you often have sect stories with martial arts stuff where there's a sect entrance exam. The tower was my sect entrance exam, but I did not elucidate that clearly enough to readers, and I created the wrong expectations.
Yeah, I'm thinking about how I would fix that if I were you. And like, this is not advice, right? This is just me trying like, this is how I learn best by kind of like looking at other people's stuff and then like, how would I do it better? Which makes me very, very arrogant sometimes, but also gives me complexes because like I've been reading this book called So When Am I a Hero by Saving Throw, and anything I would do to that book would make it worse. It is that good. This book gives me a complex. It is that good. But yeah.
I've got to check that out then.
Yeah. Oh, I can give you many recommendations. Like also, when you were talking about like world building and making everything bigger and bigger and like, you know, standing on the shoulders of giants, you should check out Guildmage. Dave Niemans has been on this podcast like a while ago. And while I was traveling in Japan, I binged that entire book. Like I don't have much time to read anymore, but I could not stop reading that. It was so good.
Please send me these recommendations later. I will absolutely take a look.
Will do. And you will probably, if I don't forget, Sorry. You will also find those down below in the comments. And yeah, cool. So, best advice I've ever gotten was, hey, keep your promises in mind while you're writing the story.
100%.
Okay, absolutely.
So that is definitely something that I could have improved on. And I don't even think it would have been all that complicated. So in my particular case, I've mentioned the comparison to a second entrance exam. If in the introduction, right before Corin goes into the tower, which is just a couple pages in the current format, if I had made it clearer, like that this was something that he needed to do expressly so that he could go to a magical university and learn magic powers so that he could meet his other goals, I absolutely think that that would have worked. He probably just needed to have a conversation with somebody else in line or talk to the guard at the front gate about that specific concept in some way. And I wouldn't necessarily have even needed the train scene that I had in my original version of the draft. I could have just kept that same scene, about a few paragraphs of discussing like, okay, I really need to go and survive this tower thing. And then I needed to get enough power that I can come back and climb the tower later. Always the plan. It is like, there are a couple lines talking about it, but if I had a clearer conversation with somebody where it really just made the premise obvious, that would have helped.
Yeah. I was thinking along those lines. Yeah. Starting college, for example, like starting at you have do you have your dungeon crawl proof or whatever, yeah, I think you would probably write it better than I would, thinking about it.
No, it's fine. I mean, there's plenty of ways you could do it. I could show people who are in line, who already have picked up pieces of their school uniform that are very excited about it, or are reading the guide to starting at the school, because they're that confident they're going to succeed, or that they're trying to distract themselves from the possibility that they might fail. Or they're talking to their parents about what classes they're going to take. There absolutely are routes that I could have gone with that.
And then just to set a scene, you brutally murder at least 15 of them in the first 5 pages.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Rocks fall, everybody dies except the main character. That's how that works.
Exactly, yeah. I can see you were a D&D game master before.
Oh, 100%. I've thrown in fun D&D references here and there. The rocks falling, gazebos as a monster, hilarious. Mimics.
I recently learned that mimics were actually supposed to be very intelligent monsters.
Yeah. And in their natural environments that they can look different. Oh yeah, super interesting. But everybody's got Dark Souls mimics now, basically, that are just jump scare monsters.
Yeah. Is it a Dark Souls thing?
I think that's probably what popularized them as being jump scares specifically. We talked about Lufia earlier.
Exactly, I was about to say that, yeah.
Yeah. So they've been in games for a very long time, even video games. But I think the level of terror in opening the mimic box in Dark Souls sort of repopularized that trope.
Because it's also the first friggin' box you find.
Sure. Dark Souls is just hilariously punishing, and that kind of experience, it's very memorable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can a team of has-been teen idols save the world? Find out in the new series Boy Bands and Dragons. When Neverboyland is sucked into a magical world, their reunion takes a back seat to staying alive. But if they can get over the past drama that drove them apart, they may find that even pop stars can be heroes. Come and discover your new favorite read, Our Comeback Tour is Slaying Monsters, the first in the Boy Bands and Dragons series by Kim Smuga Otto, dropping on Kindle Unlimited, October 25th.
What's one thing that you would do differently now that you've learned about writing or are doing differently already?
Great question. And this is a really interesting one because I think I've overcorrected. So for Arcane Ascension, I would say that the single biggest flaw in Sufficiently Advanced Magic was that I had the main character appear to know virtually nothing about the magic system, which did not make any sense. And from a writing standpoint, there's a frame story that he is telling this to a foreigner who comes from a land with a different magic system, and that is why he's explaining it. But you don't know what the frame story is until book 2. So it comes across like the main character is learning all of this stuff for the first time that he, as a child growing up in this setting, should have known some of. Now, there are also other in-story justifications for why he doesn't know certain things. He is an abused child who was taken out of school for many years, and so he's behind on the curriculum and things like that. But there definitely are basics where he should know this stuff, and it doesn't even feel internally consistent. When he's in the dungeon crawl at the beginning of the story, he seems like he's pretty knowledgeable about what's going on for the basics of the setting. But when he gets to the school, he's talking about these extremely basic concepts that people are learning about in the classes. And all I really needed to do was make it clear in that first book that the classes were rudimentary for people who were, the country kids who did not have this explanation, but that he, who grew up in the city, does know a lot about this stuff. And that it's a review for him, and that he is explaining it for the purposes that he is telling this in the frame story to a foreigner, and that foreigner may not know how this stuff works. That would have been very easy to execute on, but I didn't do it in the first book, and that was a tremendous flaw. When I wrote Edge of the Woods, I overcorrected. Edge knows a ton of stuff about the local magic system, and he just constantly info drops. And that is definitely an overcorrection. I loved writing that book. That book is written for me as a reader because it's tons and tons of magic system stuff, and I love that. But for the average reader, it was too much.
Yeah, I got that. Just give me 1 second.
While you do your camera correction, I am going to go use the restroom. So we can pause for a moment, and I'm gonna silence.
All right, we're back. What were we talking about?
We were talking about how much a character knows about the magic system, and making sure that it feels internally consistent with the setting work. In Corin's case, it felt like maybe it would be okay that he had some of the gaps in his education because of the background that he has. But for like basic stuff about how attunements work and things like that, he doesn't feel internally consistent with throughout the story. Tower Corin seems to know more than School Corin does, and so that doesn't flow well. And then it doesn't mesh well with the setting work. And so there are plenty of ways that I could have made that clearer. I could have just talked more about how the classes were recap. I could have made the frame story itself clear that he was like, I knew all this, but I'm telling you about, how this stuff works and what they were talking about in class for your benefit, foreigner. That would have been really easy to do. I just didn't do it.
One thing that I kind of like doing, I wrote this very unpublished book called The Flower, the Wish, and the Blood. That's a urban fantasy. Thank you. Wait until you see the cover. Yeah, I had lots of fun with this book. It's my first finished novel. It's an urban fantasy set in Berlin, so it's never going to see the light of day because no trad is ever going to publish this, and I will not put this. I will not edit this, and basically need to do an entire rewrite because it's my first novel.
Sure.
But maybe later, if I have some time.
That's what I've been telling myself with my 5 unpublished novels.
Exactly. But the core idea there is that the main character, Valerie, she's a vampire, and she basically wants to bring her vampire house back to glory because it's all decrepit and it's all falling apart, and the literal physical house is connected to the name of the house, and that's kind of like the power fantasy setting in it. And so she basically goes to a job fair and wants to hire a mercenary, and then finds this basically saint that has God-given powers of basically being Neo in the Matrix. Slow down.
Amazing.
Type of, yeah, it's fun. But she tells this entire story sitting in a club called Details, talking to a guy called Mr. Lichterfeld, which is a German pun, by the way.
Oh, good. I love pun names.
Yeah. And she's, they're talking, and she's in the first book quite obviously into him, and she's trying to like impress him with how cool everything was. And he's like, no, just tell me everything, tell me all the details. And then there's always like this kind of like very, very short breaks where he interjects a question or she explains something. I think that's kind of cool and that's fun. But I mean,
it is, and I do that in Weapons and Wielders. I do have that kind of structure, and I consider that to be a huge improvement, where I start out Weapons and Wielders showing the frame story of the main character telling that story, so you know who the audience is, and then there are interludes and interjections where the main character of Weapons and Wielders is being like, and you in particular should know this and this and this, and I like that kind of structure. I don't know. It's fun. It adds flavor to a first-person narration when you know what the frame story is. There are reasons not to do it sometimes, but I enjoy it.
How would you write a story where the main character gets a new magic power that no one else has, and they can't figure it out?
Oh, that's a tricky one. I guess it would depend on whether or not magic powers in a general sense are already well known in that setting. And if so, then the person is probably going to be having to try to figure out, how does this fit in with this existing structure? Does it or does it not? If it does not, is there some sort of tool that is available within the existing structure that can be used to identify or diagnose this? I tend to think about these things in terms of problem solving. So like, if I was a person in this universe with the information that I had available, what recourse would I have if I had a new magic power? Like, who could I go to? Is there, a seer or a diviner or an oracle or something like that could give me some answers? Are there old lore books that I can go through for figuring out, like, was this an ancient magic that people used to have? What can I do to test this? If I know I've got a magic power, but I don't know what it does, how does it activate? What are simple basic tests that I can do to figure out the parameters of this? Are there costs when I attempt to use it? Is it voice activated? Is it thought activated? Is it gesture activated? What happens when I try each of these different things?
I mean, there's a reason why I'm asking, right? Because like it's very tough to write this kind of like, in general, in a narrative structure. The answer to all of your questions is basically, it is a fusion of divine creation magics and technology that was created in this cataclysmic event that the main character doesn't even remember happening, and that, did some very interesting stuff. But my question here is like, I always like this is my problem, I guess, with like not having enough reader feedback or not trusting reader feedback that I get, because I have this like Groucho Marx problem, right? Where it's like, I don't want to be part of any club that would have me as a member.
Hilarious.
So it's like, wait, you're saying it's good, but I'm getting like not very good ratings. So what's going on here? But like the probably need another rewrite. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. No, I actually do need another rewrite. The issue I'm facing is I'm struggling with, am I giving too much information or not enough? Right?
It's going to depend on the reader. I mean, ultimately, that's very subjective. You need to know your audience, and you need to write to whatever the parameters are for your audience. But as a general rule, I think that I tend toward, these days, providing too much information over too little, because but then you might need to scale back the complexity. So I don't think in Edge of the Woods, when I'm talking about my overcorrecting in terms of how much the main character knew about the magic system, I don't think my flaw was that the main character knew too much. I think it's that I put too much into the first book. And like, he could have had all of this information, but I did not need to info drop all of this information at the time period that I did.
Oh God, yeah.
So
yeah. Now tell me about it. Like, I follow the same problem that you had, right?
Mhm.
Where in the first book I didn't explain, like first version, I didn't explain anything, nothing at all, because I love Tamsin Moore, and Tamsin Moore doesn't explain anything, and I don't know how she does it, but I
Because
can't.
the magic system itself and like Gideon is
Yeah.
not the important part of problem resolution. It's a relationship story.
Oh
Um,
yeah. And it's like she uses words where you're like, wait, these make sense, but I know they have something to do with that magic, but I have no idea what they do.
all right, you've got some weird bone stuff. That guy's got some spirit magic. Sure.
Yeah.
So those books, I love them, but they
Yeah.
are not fair play mysteries. And I
Yeah.
think that that's one of the things that we need to talk about in terms of the structure of progression
Mm.
fantasy. Some progression fantasy is written structurally similarly to a fair play mystery, which is where I tend to skew. I want my readers to be able to understand enough about the magic system that they can reasonably know this character, when they come into this dire situation, it is plausible that they can resolve the problem on hand through these tools at their disposal. However, not every progression fantasy writer subscribes to that notion. I would say that something that's antithetical to that, for example, would be the similarly named title to my own, Path of Ascension, instead of Arcane Ascension. In Path of Ascension, the author often reveals abilities at the time that they are first used. It's like Matt learned this off screen during time skip. And that is used to create moments that make Matt or Liz or other characters look absolutely awesome because they're pulling out some sort of new tool that they've picked up while they were training. But it is not fair play. And it is a fundamentally different approach. And neither approach is right or wrong. They have different effects on the reader. So I tend to write everything out as a puzzle to be solved. And when you're looking at Gideon the Ninth, that is not a puzzle to be solved. You do not have enough information about the magic system to even attempt it.
And that's what gets me so hooked on these things, right? Because like I always feel like it's she's very, very good at this.
Oh, yeah.
It's at the tip of my tongue. Like it's almost within reach, but I never quite get it. But I think, yeah, you're giving me a good idea here, because I think that I've been trying to mix the two, so that's not really not working out.
That's tricky.
Yeah, and like I said, I didn't explain anything about the world either, because like in the first novel, it started. The first version, it started with Sam with a flashback scene, then Sam waking up, and there's like a long boot up scene, and then she just like name drops like all these places that are important and never explains anything about them, right?
So that's the style of Claire Obscure. Hilarious, because we were just talking about the fact that you can't play that right now, but it's absolutely drops you in media res a million proper nouns that like every character knows. But I'm like, what are you talking about? What is chroma? What is luminance? What is this setting?
I got two reviews. Like I basically got 2 reviews in 10 different flavors, and they were either like the very, very amazingly titled in media rakes with an X. Cool. Like,
love it.
Mad props to you, Severin. That was like a really, really, really good title. And the other one was, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah. I mean, and that's kind of the reactions you get to anything that's like, Claire Obscure or Dark Souls. What you're talking about, you're writing in the Dark Souls style, where everything's environmental. What's that?
How did they make that work? Because I can't seem to make it work.
It's a target demographic thing. Like,
for fuck's sake.
No, really. Like, I don't think you're going to find a Dark Souls style story as successful on Royal Road. Royal Road wants instant gratification.
You're telling me this after my second rewrite?
Sorry. I mean,
I've written 350,000 words on that thing.
Okay, well, I mean, and maybe you will find an audience for that in media res style on a platform like Royal Road. But maybe rather than throwing it out if you don't think that it's successful, you should try publishing it in a different format instead. Because Gideon, I don't know if Gideon would have succeeded in that environment. Now, Gideon's a little bit of a weird case because it's about, quips and, pop culture references and stuff too. It's a child of Homestuck. But the style of Gideon isn't strictly just in media res. It's that Homestuck Tumblr crowd kind of story, and that's a very different thing from just a Dark Souls. But you see things on our fantasy where people are asking for something that has a Dark Souls atmosphere all the time. And I do think that could potentially work in more of just the epic fantasy marketplace. But in terms of like progression fantasy or that sort of thing, people want to know the power set on the first page. Like if you look at something like Path of Ascension, as I mentioned, I feel like that's kind of an example of what people are looking for on Royal Road. What Matt's power is, or the foundation of his overpowered power set on page 1 of that story. Completely different from what I grew up with and from what I write. But that's the Royal Road target, I feel like.
Yeah. I mean, like people have been trying, like we were talking about this earlier, right? Like understanding something and getting told it. I think that like at this point I should just like get it over with and just kind of write the novel, but like put it out there and do something else.
Yeah,
because
okay. So what you're doing, Bastion by Phil Tucker. You're writing something comparable to that. Main character wakes up, no memories, in a weird situation, and then gradually has to figure out what in the world is going on with this bizarre setting. Bastion, hugely successful. Absolutely love it personally. I think it's one of Phil's best works. I love Phil's writing in general. And that's very much an in media res sort of thing. Bizarre like setting. And yeah, maybe you just need to go like more of a self-pub or trad pub route with your story. I don't know if Bastion would have succeeded on that platform. Should talk to Phil, see what he says. I know he's had some interesting struggles with Royal Road as well.
Yeah, I mean, like I did talk to him about it, and he said the same thing as you did, basically. We both don't believe that Bastion would have succeeded on Royal Road, and I also don't believe that he did try something. He wrote Dawn of the Void on Royal Road, right?
He's also got a new one, Throne of the Fallen, that is also on Royal Road. And in both cases, I feel like those have been a mismatch initially for the platform. Absolutely love his new story, by the way. It's just that I prefer the same style that Phil writes, which is much more of a traditional novel structure.
Yeah. Okay, well, maybe I should stop trying to make it work. But at this point, I have like written myself, like I've written so much of this thing. I think I'm like, between all the rewrites and everything, I think I'm like down 500,000. So
welcome to the sunk cost fallacy.
I know. So, I'm finishing it, and then I'm kind of like going like,
or float it in another format and see what happens in another format. If you're invested in it, try self-publishing it. Try taking it to a trad publisher if you really want to give that a shot. And see how that goes, and maybe it'll be completely different from the Royal Road experience.
I will do that, and like to be honest, also I'm gonna write something for Royal Road first, though, because I just kind of like I've stopped believing that I will be like any sort of successful with my books. I'm cool with that. Because I have like so many other outlets for my stuff. I love my work, but I think what I really want to do is I want to write a book that I find good. And that's like a bit of a problem because like you're always raising your own goalposts.
Sure, right? Of course.
Just gotta be careful a little bit. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish it. I'm going to let it rest for a year or so, and then I'm going to maybe go back, do a complete like from scratch rewrite because now I know what I'm doing, which is for anyone like slapping their heads out here. Like, yes, that's how you write a book. Sometimes you throw 100%. It all away and start from scratch. And then I'm going to try it like Amazon. I'm going to skip Royal Road, maybe, give it to like 2 or 3 hardcore fans, see what they say.
Sure.
Scale it all the way down from 250,000 to 150,000, and then let's see.
I think that's a great strategy, and maybe that is where you find your market.
Yeah, cool. Maybe not. We'll see.
Maybe not.
Maybe
sometimes you swing and you miss. And I have had plenty of cases where I've written something that I do not think would have been successful in any market, which is why I've still got 5 shelf books. And
Yeah.
even some of the stuff that I have released has not been as successful as I wanted it to be. Or you have the problem of disproportionate success, where Arcane Ascension is just so much more successful than my other stuff that it makes it hard to justify writing other things. And that is very, very tricky.
I mean, absolutely. Like, I especially feel as though like that's something I kind of never really want to do. Like that's one thing that I mean, DJ Khaled writes something from success. Like I don't want to get to that point where I cannot write what I want because my financial, like my survival, like my house, my everything relies on me writing more of this one thing.
Absolutely.
And if I hop around a lot. Sometimes I like, like silly stories like a black band. Some days I like, hardcore exploration of the human psyche, like in Torchbearer.
Love it.
And I don't want to get bogged down on it. So, and maybe like this is something also like I'm asking all this like in way of question.
Sure.
How do you deal with that necessarily? Like, because I mean, imagine you were like slightly less successful. Imagine you were just at that point where you made the jump. You are writing for a living, but at the same time, you have that one series that you need to do. Otherwise, you're going to lose your house.
I mean, then I've got to keep doing it. And there really is no alternative at that phase. I am immensely lucky in this universe that I am successful enough that I have been able to take breaks and, work on other stories as inspiration hits me. I think that by being able to take those breaks, each of my individual series is stronger as a result of that. But if I did not have that luxury, then I absolutely would have had to keep trucking with something like Arcane Ascension if that was still my most successful series. And then I think the series would have ended up being weaker as a result, and I probably would have burned myself out much more.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm afraid of. I always say that I want to live to write and not write to live.
Sure, yeah.
Right. And at the same time, like it's a catch-22 situation, because if you don't take the time to write, you will never get to the point where you have like a success that's big enough to allow you to take breaks. So in the end, you got to know what you want to do. And to be honest, Andrew, like after meeting you and hanging out with you like for about like almost 2 hours now, I'm really happy that it worked out for you, because that sounds awesome.
I mean, it's great. I'm tremendously lucky. And I think that that's also like ultimately what it comes down to more than anything else. This is not that I'm more talented than most of the people in the lit RPG and progression fantasy space. I would say that the vast majority of my success comes from launching the right book at the right time. And I think that that's true for most of the hyper successful authors. We either launched the right book at the right time, or we connected with the right literary agent, or we connected with the right publisher, or the qualities of the books, they don't always translate into direct success. There are some writers that I think are genuinely stronger writers than I am. I mean, obviously that's hyper subjective. There are lots of different things that could be considered quality as a writer. Prose is one thing, world building, characters, all that stuff. But there are people who I would say are generally stronger as writers, in my opinion, which is hyper subjective, than I am, that are not at the same level of success that I have. I feel very fortunate that I am where I am. I will say that work did go into that, especially since I wrote several books before I published one. So it took me many, many years before I launched something, and that was work. But I also was fortunate to be in a financial place where I could do that. I had a day job where I was writing while I had a good day job. And honestly, luck of the draw as well, that I was born in California, which is essentially the capital of the gaming industry, and was able to get a job in the gaming industry when I was very young. The vast majority of people would not have the same opportunities that I did in that regard either. So I am a confluence of factors that put me in a lucky enough position to have the time and money to write a bunch of books, get better, and then write something and publish it that was okay enough that I got some success.
There's like, I mean, like the idiom exists in English as well, right? Luck is for the brave. I feel as though like luck, in general, plays a huge role, but luck is maybe not something that the same as it is usually described. So if you're talking to Shirt, if you're talking to Matt, if you're talking to Zogarth, anyone really, they all had the same thing. They all wrote some sort of stuff before, and then they all said fuck it, and they wrote something that they really liked, or whether there's passion in it, or they got really lucky. But luck, again, it's not as much it's my opinion, I guess, is being able to recognize possibilities and opportunities and capitalizing on them.
Sure.
Right.
Oh, absolutely. And I would say that the greatest success that I've had in that sense isn't actually anything that has brought me any financial success, but I would consider one of my greatest successes in life to be that I recognized that there was a subgenre that we now call progression fantasy. And that came up in discussion between Will White and myself and Jess Richards. And I was talking to both of them separately online about the existence of something that was not Chinese cultivation novels and was not lit RPG, not strictly, but existed sort of in an overlapping space with them, where you have a core loop that is effectively the Karate Kid with magic, or Dragon Ball, or that sort
Dragon
of
Ball, yeah.
Dragon Ball. But not every shonen battle manga is progression fantasy. So I can't just call it that. Rurouni Kenshin is not a progression fantasy. Rurouni Kenshin is max level from the start of the series. There are plenty of examples like that.
Okay, that's like an OP man protagonist.
Yeah.
So that's still progression fantasy, I think.
I think anything that's like Rurouni Kenshin or Overlord is tangentially related to progression fantasy. But if Ainz from Overlord is max level at the start of the story, I would not consider that to be exactly progression fantasy. I would say it is a lit RPG that has overlap with the progression fantasy space.
Okay. So
that's my personal definition. And this is all coming from where I first wrote this definition in 2019. Fans will have different ideas of this. There are a lot of people out there who say lit RPG is a subcategory of progression fantasy now. I don't agree with that. I think it's a Venn diagram where they overlap. So that's my perception of the subgenre, that progression fantasy requires that you have a character that has a motivation to continue getting stronger. And they actively on screen work toward getting stronger. That is not the case for Overlord or Rurouni Kenshin.
Okay, but so in your case, like Overlord would be a lit RPG, but it wouldn't be a progression fantasy.
Exactly, 100%.
Okay.
Or Freyren is a shonen battle series, but it is not a progression fantasy.
Pardon? Frieren.
Is that better? Frieren.
That's a German. It's a German word, yes.
Yeah, and they use German names for the characters and such too, like
Himmel. Himmel is stark is just like strong. Himmel is like heaven. Frieren is like the verb of to be cold or to shiver.
Right, and her mentor is means hot, right? It was flam, something like that.
It's flame.
Flame. It's just pronounced flame. Fair enough.
Yeah. Flamme. It's flame. Yeah.
There you go. So she's cold. Her mentor was hot. Absolutely love that series, by the way. But I would say that it follows more in a structure similar to something like Kino no Tabi, which is not really about progression for the main character. It's about an emotional journey and seeing cool stuff all over the world. And you can make an argument that the apprentices are doing some progression stuff. So again, kind of like ancillary to progression fantasy. But I would still say shonen battle, but not progression fantasy. That's my take on it.
Mm. No, I mean it's fair, right? I always considered like lit RPG and progression fantasy to like be of the same branch, because I don't think I personally think that like OP main protagonist is like a subgenre of like progression fantasy, which is basically you skip the entire progression and you focus mostly on like the competency fantasy, right?
Sure.
Um, but I can definitely see your point.
I see that as being sort of a related space. So
Mm,
I divide progression fantasy itself into two subcategories. My
mm,
my my subcategories are fantasy of uniqueness, which that is very
mm,
similar to,
mm,
where the main character is the specialist snowflake in the universe and has something that nobody else has. And this
mm,
usually ends up being either a solo protagonist or somebody who is in a party but is much better than everybody else at the party, or that sort of thing. Solo leveling is the most obvious example here, where only
it's in the
I
name.
level up.
Yeah,
And that is the fantasy of uniqueness.
yeah.
Opposite side of the spectrum is fantasy of fairness,
Mm,
where this
yeah.
main character is not necessarily special, but they work so hard that they are
Mm.
able to get good.
What was
And
that karate shonen again? Where the kid, it's a manga where the kid like joins this like weird dojo of like weird ass people.
I don't know if
Um,
I've read that one.
it was
Uh,
very good. Like it's basically what you were saying, right?
sure.
So like they all have like these like weird talents and like they have all different like martial art styles, like karate and like Brazilian jiu-jitsu and
So,
capoeira and stuff like that. And each of those masters has like something different. Um,
sure.
and it's always like those masters fighting like some sort of like evil super sect, and the disciples fighting like the like disciples of that evil super sect. Like it's a mirroring. It's really fun. And like at one point he's like, well, I don't have any like powers. I'm just like high school kid. He's like, no, like your talent is like the talent of hard work, right?
Yeah,
And that's the fantasy of fairness.
absolutely. Hard work is the talent. And so that's Rage of
Mm.
Dragons, or that is Rock Lee in a Naruto.
Yeah,
Like that is the genius of effort character.
yeah.
And I write, or I tend to write, characters that swing a little closer to that. Corin is much closer to that style of character.
Mm.
Karis in Weapons and Wielders is a little bit closer to the fantasy of uniqueness side of the spectrum. And then some of
Mm.
my other characters are more in the middle.
Mm.
Will White did a perfect job of writing right in the middle, I feel like.
Yeah,
Cradle is right in the middle.
yeah.
So
Spoilers. I love that moment when he was like he was trying to like give all his advantages to like his friends like later on in the series, and it's like, well, maybe not everyone can be as quick to level up as I
absolutely.
can. Yeah, it was a cool,
So
cool moment.
and another interesting division there. So leveling speed is a great example of
Mm,
where these things are different. So um, if you look at Forge of Destiny, for example,
mm,
the main character in Forge of Destiny is basically a cultivator. And
mm,
her skill set essentially is like she is a street kid, but she levels up really fast. Very classic progression fantasy talent. But she levels up maybe 25% faster than average. And there are other people that can keep up with her. That to me is a fantasy of fairness, or closer. It's a spectrum, but
mm,
like she has the classic levels up faster skill set that is
mm,
very, very common in progression fantasy, but it's of a margin where people who have other advantages can still keep up with her.
mm,
Iron Prince, on the other hand, is the exact same formula, but with fantasy of uniqueness,
yeah,
because Raiden in that series is leveling up at 20 times the normal speed, and
mm,
nobody can possibly keep up with that mathematically.
mm,
So it's the exact same core premise of like disadvantaged child who can level up quickly, but the fantasy of fairness version is this is a 25% boost versus a 20 times boost in Iron Prince.
mm. Yeah. I yeah, I really like Iron Prince too. By the way,
I do
like
too.
the
I love it.
like one of the things that I really like writing and also reading is like the like whole like found family thing.
Absolutely.
And I feel as though like Bryce does like an amazing job with like I'm not gonna like spoil who for anyone who hasn't read it, like go read the book. But like there's like one side character who's like a very, very mean asshole at the beginning, and they kind of like have like a
Oh, you're
really
going to make
big
some
twist.
rage in the comments by talking about that particular character and some love
Why?
interests involved. That's
Oh,
probably
oh my God,
the controversial
love
thing in all of Iron Prince.
love interests in my progression fantasy is more likely
Yeah.
than you think.
Anyway, I know who you're talking about, and
Yeah,
Bruce does a good job of dealing with that in book 2. Very,
yeah,
very, very smart.
yeah. I mean, like, what was it like? Oh yeah, I think Travis called Jason, so shirt called Jason an SJW cuck once,
Oh
and on the
boy!
on the podcast. Yeah, it was fun.
Oh boy!
He was very, very self disparaging. He was like, yeah, everyone says so. So
That's funny.
yeah, it's very funny. But like the
I
whole
like
like
social justice warrior characters. I
yeah.
think we could do with more Jasons in this genre. Jason is what we
Mhm.
talked about. I think this was pre main recording,
Mhm.
but I like characters with extreme personalities more than I like blank slate protagonists. And
Mhm.
oh boy, Jason is not a blank slate protagonist.
Mhm.
Jason is a character with a very, very strong personality. And to me, that is infinitely more interesting than random blank slate, straight white dude, which is the main character of 99% of every epic fantasy of all time.
Yeah.
I'm much more interested in reading the Jasons of the world.
Yeah, because like I mean, like to be honest, like again, it's subjective. You said it. You said it. I want to say it again, just so that no one gets upset. You're perfectly fine if you want to like have some insert stuff. If you want to eat hot dogs, go and eat
Sure.
hot dogs. It's fine. Um,
And I
there's a
write
song.
let's be fair.
Mhm.
I have
Mhm.
Karis as my reader inserts like
Yeah,
white male power fantasy
yeah,
protagonist. That is what
yeah.
Karis is, guys. He
Mhm.
is your overpowered, punches his way through every problem, straight male power fantasy character.
Yeah.
And if there are areas where that deviates from the standard, he is also a social justice warrior. But
Mhm.
Karis is still the power fantasy character. And then
Yeah.
for my other series, I have characters like Corin and Lien that are not. And Yui as well. Like having a female
Mhm.
character in this genre. Oh my God. Is that allowed?
No, it is not. The podcast
No.
is over.
I'm banned from progression fantasy forever. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, the gods of Reddit have spoken. No, I mean like Reddit is actually pretty cool about this.
Reddit
But
is.
like, yeah, like again, like not going too deep into politics, but like, yeah, I mean like another thing that maybe might have contributed to people not enjoying Torchbearer as much as they might have had on Amazon is the fact that my main character is a 30-something-year-old female manager.
Great. I love that.
Yeah,
I would love to read more characters like that personally.
with anger issues.
Fantastic.
There you
Um,
go. Yeah, but like, yeah, I gotta finish this thing. Any hoozle, we are overtime already for the
oh,
main
wow.
podcast. Yeah. Quick, give me one book that you love and why is it awesome?
The Brightest Shadow by Sarah Lynn. This is an
Okay,
easy
thank you.
one. I shill this book anytime I possibly can. So The Brightest Shadow is what happens when you take the classic idea of a hero and a Dark Lord or Demon King, and you have characters in the setting that are treating these things that are more like natural disasters that are unavoidable,
Mhm.
and people and the protagonists in the story are attempting to solve what is the origin of these things and how do we live in a world and deal with the fact that these forces of nature exist and twist the universe around them.
Mhm.
And super, super interesting take on that. I love seeing interesting takes on heroes and demon kings in general. And this is probably the best example of that I've ever seen. Sorry, Will
Mhm.
White for House of Blades. I still love you. But this is the Brightest Shadow is so good. It is. You've got
Mhm.
Brandon Sanderson's Win and Truth up there. This is very structurally similar to Stormlight Archives. I like it more than I like Stormlight Archives. So
Okay, wow.
there's your Heresy of the day. I like.
We had Plenty of Heresy. Oh my God, that's going to be a podcast title. Plenty of Heresy with Andrew Rowe. I'm going to write that down.
Yeah, it's our new Warhammer podcast.
Heresy. Brother, get the flamer. The heavy flamer.
Oh, wonderful. So yeah, there's my shilling for Sarah Lynn. Sarah is fantastic in general, but everybody reads Ware Key on maybe Street Cultivation, and Broda Shadow just does not get enough love. It is my absolute favorite.
Yeah, I read Ware Key. Ware Key was fine. Like the idea of like building a house, like that was really, really good.
Ware Key is probably the best magic system in progression base. I don't think anybody has done as well.
We got to talk in the bonus material. We got to talk about how we would translate that into a video game. We're going to talk about it.
Oh yeah, that would be so good. Like you've got your little town sim built into the magic system. Oh, so good.
Give people a reason to give me $5.
No, 100%. It's so good. Just being able to build an magic system. Well, go ahead.
Yeah, I got to pay my editor. Like my the entirety of my podcast money all goes to my editor. I'm not making any money off this. Like, just give my editor some money, please. He's doing an amazing job. Now,
absolutely.
Shout outs. Quick.
I love Will White's work. I love John Bierce's work. I love Tobias Begley's work. I love Sarah Lynn's work. I love Bryce O'Connor's work. I love Phil Tucker's work.
It's always great that people use their powers to shout out smaller authors.
Okay, all right, smaller authors. I mentioned Lauren to you earlier, Lauren Reiber, and Lauren is a publisher, but Menoct Loop is fantastic, and I would say Lauren's probably not as well known in this space as Lauren is as a publisher. Absolutely love Lauren's work. Also, some of the things that Lauren publishes, like Virtuous Sons. Virtuous Sons is so good. So strong recommendation for Virtuous Sons. There's one of my more obscure ones for the day.
If you want like some more out there lit RPG, like something that's like not standard, always go check Thomas Wynn's website. Like they have amazing stuff out there that you don't get anywhere else.
Wish Upon a Stars.
Yeah, Wish Upon a Stars. Yeah, by Malcolm Tent.
There's a shout out from Malcolm there.
Virtuous. There was one more. Nameless Sovereign. God, those covers.
I haven't read the Nameless Sovereign yet. I should pick it up.
Those covers rock so hard, man.
Oh man, they get some great covers with that publisher in general. Phenomenal stuff.
I also want to ask like one last question. Who does your covers?
Oh, almost all of my covers are by Daniel Cameron. And Daniel, he is one of the absolute best artists in this whole space. I attribute a large part of my early success to Daniel for his cover stuff. So I will give you a link so that you can put that in the video. Daniel is incredibly good. I have been working with him since Forging Divinity. He is not all of my covers, but he is basically all of my mainline covers.
Who does the typesetting? Is it also him?
No. So Sean T. King does most of my typesetting work. He's full-time with Wraithmarked now. So he is not able to do all of my stuff, but I mean, congratulations to him for having a good job with working with Bryce. But
I absolutely love this stuff. Like, didn't he also do like homicidal aliens that are attacking and all I got was a stat menu?
I don't know if he did that one or not, but he's done a lot of things in this subgenre space. Phenomenally good. So absolutely huge recommendation for Sean.
Cool. All right. And with that, we're going to have to cut it short.
Absolutely.
And
we've been talking
for the Patreon.
Thank you so much for the interview. It's been a blast.
Absolutely. Like the pleasure.
Yeah, that's better. Yeah.
Pleasure is all mine. Yeah. And if you enjoyed this interview, we're going to keep talking a little bit more in the Patreon content. Again, I need to pay my editor. Otherwise, I'll be starving and poor. Hope you enjoyed it. And without further ado, please like, subscribe, leave a comment. You know the drill. Anything that like pleases the algorithm gods. And I'll see you next time. And if you're on Patreon, the show goes on.